Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. You know, it's always good when we can get information from people much smarter than us, especially when they can tell us a little bit about weather and how things are going. We welcome in per Skype meteorologist Lauren Nash. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
We appreciate it. Now, listen, we were glad to have you in the studio. I know a few weeks ago we got to talk a little bit about hurricane season, but this hurricane season is different than last. But I don't want people to get nice and relaxed thinking that everything's okay. Let's just kind of talk about where we are right now this year as compared to last.
Well, last year, as you know, was record breaking in basically every sense of the word. So it's kind of hard to compare any season to 2020. But we have been off to a pretty quick start. You know, we're already through the letter E, which Elsa was the earliest E storm on record. So just because we've been quiet the last couple of weeks doesn't mean we have not been off to a record-breaking start for 2021. So we'll take the break and we'll see how the next few months go.
Yeah, and it's so very nice that we here, especially, didn't necessarily have to feel the strength of a major storm or even the strength of those storms. But hurricane season lasts for quite a while, and we're not even close to the middle of hurricane season.
That's correct. And typically peak hurricane season is not until mid to the late September. So we are still very far away from our peak hurricane season, especially in the Gulf region.
Yeah, and so really exciting. Now, I know one of those things you mentioned where, this is the earliest we get to an E, but you know, those named storms, we made a change here from last year. We had so many of those named storms that we went to the Greek alphabet, and quite frankly, it felt Greek to most of us in a situation like last year. They've changed that a little bit this year.
They did. So the Greek alphabet was extremely confusing. For one thing, people thought that Z and Zeta was the last letter of the alphabet, so everybody sort of panicked that we ran out of names. And all of the beta, eta, thetas, iotas all got very confusing. So this year, if we get unlucky enough to get through the alphabet, we would just start over on another list that starts with A, just on normal names again.
Yeah, you say normal names, but a lot of those are historical names, you know, interestingly enough. And so we got both Anna and Elsa in the same group. So we're hoping things are going to be a little colder, right?
I think that's the hope. Get a lot of good news about that.
Yeah, exactly. And so speaking of E, I mean, we've already gotten to E, but I don't know that we've had a lot of those storms necessarily be near us. Is there some steering currents or some things that we're seeing? I've heard something about some of the dust that's making a difference in the atmosphere, that's kind of steering maybe some of this hot weather and necessarily with the storms?
The dust would be stopping some development right now. So as those waves come off Africa, the dust basically, because of the dry air that the dust brings in, there's not enough moisture for the hurricanes to really get going. So that does help suppress the hurricanes. In terms of like where they're going, obviously Claudette did come up the Gulf, and a lot of early season storms typically favor the Gulf. But I think probably what you're talking about is kind of a high pressure area that's kind of been sitting over the Atlantic, which did help to steer Elsa a little bit farther east, but is also helping to keep this moisture over us over the last month or two, and probably is helping to enhance some of the rainfall we've had as well. But that's just kind of this large scale highs and lows that we talk about a lot.
Yeah, and so some of those weather changes, it's especially hot. And so, you know, and not everybody kind of understands that. Sometimes we have a little bit warmer of a summer. Sometimes we have a little bit wetter of a summer. And those things kind of change a little bit. But with regards to these storms, are we seeing any predictions about waves? Or I know that we're being able to identify these waves much sooner. Can you talk a little bit about how we've developed a better system of understanding when is coming and what is coming and how soon?
That's a great question. It's something that a lot of people forget. For one, satellites. So I know you guys may have heard of one of the big satellite launches we had a few years back in 2017, but we didn't have those before about the 1970s. So anything that was over the open water, unless there was a ship that happened to pass near it or by it and was able to get that report to land, we had no idea that there was anything out there. So these satellites being able to sense what's going on across the entire globe has allowed us to investigate those cloud formations and those storms. And then the second biggest piece of that is the hurricane hunters. The hurricane hunters, the equipment on those planes has not been around for very long either. They're able to take off and land at different airports, more airports than they did in the past, and we're able to get them into more storms. So all of that goes into our weather prediction models. And whenever we get as much data as possible, we can get the best forecast out. So all of that data helps us to forecast these storms.
Yeah, and so we even get some of these warnings and these alerts so much faster, and our predictability has gotten better as well. Can maybe address that?
Yeah, our predictability has gotten a lot better. I know a lot of people probably don't think that or don't feel like it in the age of the internet and social media, but I don't remember what the exact statistic is, but it's something like our error on day 3 right now, so let's say it's 50 miles, used to be the error on day 1 back 10, 15 years ago. So we've increased our forecasting abilities by almost 2 days just over the last 10 to 15 years. And that's a huge increase in predictability and can really help get people either to evacuate or not. And 2 success stories with that are Dorian. Look how, you could see the eye of Dorian on the Miami radar, and they did not evacuate Miami. So they completely trusted the forecast.
Because they really didn't have to. Lauren,
Exactly.
Thank you so very much. We can't thank you enough for coming on, sharing with us some updates about hurricanes and that meteorological perspective we appreciate. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And again, that's Lauren Nash, meteorologist out of New Orleans. We appreciate her very, very much. That'll do it for this segment of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. Local programming when we continue.